Hi, I'm Tash. Welcome to Tash's Library. Today's video is going to be my September wrap-up. It is a little late, but you know, life happened and so be it. Better late than never. The month of September was pretty good. I read 12 books all up. 2 of them were audiobooks, 8 were physical books, and 2 were ebooks on my Kindle. Now, because it was Scientific September, I was pretty heavy on the sci-fi and non-fiction science. So I read 5 science fiction books, 2 non-fiction books, and the rest were made up of 4 fantasy and 1 romance books. Now, with regard to Scientific September, I did not make it to 8 books. I read only 7 books, which means that I only made it to scientist career track, but that's okay. I'm really happy with that. The whole point of Scientific September was to read more science fiction and to start hitting some of my non-fiction books as well. I'm very happy with how it went. With regard to my actual TBR game, I did fulfill all the prompts bar 1. I did have the prompt for astronomical, and I was meant to be reading black holes, and I didn't read this. I just didn't feel like it at the time, and therefore I just substituted it for another non-fiction science book, which didn't fit astronomical, and so I kind of didn't make that prompt. But anyway, I'm still happy with how my reading went, and I had to go where my mood took me. I read the Terraformers by Annalee Newitz. This is a sci-fi standalone novel, and it was fulfilling the prompt titled chapters and also the Scientific September prompt for nesting, which is a book to do with terraforming. And of course, this met it perfectly. Now, this book has one of the most gorgeous covers and just so clever, and I really like it. Now, I ended up giving this 4 stars. Now, this book is set in Saskatchewan, which is being terraformed at the time, but its future comes under threat when a community is discovered living within a volcano. This is meant to be an unpopulated planet, and therefore this is a severe kink in the works. Now, this explores the themes of colonization and ecology and power, capitalism and human rights really, really well. It really explores some of the ideas of how human do you have to be to deserve rights. And that was really cool. It was also very much about the interplay between people and the environment, which I really loved. I love the world building in this. It was just so creative, so wonderful, and you could picture it so beautifully. I have no issues with Annalee Newitz's writing. It was glorious. Love Whistle the Moose, my favorite character. However, the way this book is structured, it kind of had these massive time jumps, which I did not love. I would have really liked staying with the characters for longer, because you tend to, with each time jump, you change to a whole different group of characters. And there's something about her writing style that didn't quite vibe with me. I don't know if it was the very sort of millennial style language, and maybe I'm just too old. I don't know. I didn't love it, particularly the first half. I just really wasn't feeling it. And I continued mainly because I loved the way she was exploring these particular themes, and because I wanted to see more of this world. I would, however, really recommend this to any lovers of quirky sci-fi. It is quirky, it is wacko, and it's a beautiful read. It was a good, fun read as well. A book I really adored was To Say Nothing of the Dog by Connie Willis. This was to fulfill the prompt greater than 500 pages, and it also fulfilled the prompt for Scientific September. Let's do the time warp, because it dealt with time travel. This is a science fiction book, which is loosely part of a duology, but I haven't read the other one, and this is the second one apparently, and I totally understood what was happening, so it can definitely be read as a standalone. I loved this. I gave it 5 stars. It follows Ned, who's an historian time traveler in 2057, and he's mainly traveling to World War II Coventry in order to find the bishop's bird stump to aid the reconstruction of Coventry Cathedral. However, When another historian, Verity, inadvertently creates a disturbance in the time continuum, he is sent to Victorian times to set things right. Now, there was absolutely nothing I disliked about this book. I enjoyed reading it all the way through. It has really cool comedic elements. It almost reads like a comedy of manners. It was just so fun. It kind of reminded me of those sort of really old style books where people are just sort of playing tennis and hanging out and drinking cocktails and stuff, except that it also has this quite tense plot line underlying it, these sci-fi elements, and a lot of comedy. The characterization in this was wonderful. The dog indeed is wonderful. And the plot was just really cool. I really enjoyed this book, and I would highly recommend it to any lovers of time travel books looking for a light-hearted yet philosophically deep read. A book I read on Kindle, which is a book that's been on my TBR for so long because it's a classic, is Fahrenheit 451 by Ray Bradbury. Now, I really like Ray Bradbury's writing, and The Martian Chronicles is one of my favorite books. This is a standalone science fiction book that I end up giving 3 stars to. Now, I read this to fulfill the prompt published before 2000 because it definitely was. And it also fulfilled the prompt for Scientific September, not as it should be, in other words, dystopian books. It follows Montag, who's a fireman in this bleak dystopian world where firemen no longer put out fires, but they indeed start fires and in order to burn books. However, a chance encounter makes him question society and his part in it. This book is very slow at the beginning and didn't quite engage me initially. And I have to say part of this is because I don't enjoy dystopian books. I just don't. I like a little bit more optimism in my books. Having said that, I really liked how the themes were explored in this. There were themes of knowledge versus ignorance, mass media, and how it can be used to completely suppress a population, censorship, and individuals versus conformity. It really made me think. And of course, Ray Bradbury's prose is beautiful. It always is. So that was definitely part of the book that kept me engaged. And despite the short length of this novel, I was really connected to the characters. I felt like I really got to know them. So I would really recommend this to lovers of dystopian novels. If you love dystopian, you will adore this. In the Blink of an Eye by Jo Callaghan. This is a standalone sci-fi, at least I think it's a standalone. It does leave scope for a sequel, that's for sure. I really enjoyed this and I'm giving it 4 stars. It fulfilled the prompt. It refers to time because, of course, you can do something in the blink of an eye. And it also fulfilled the Scientific September prompt, robotic, which is to do with AI. It follows DCS cat Frank, who returns to work after the death of her husband. And she is paired with an AI called Locke and tasked with investigating these cold cases of missing persons. This was really intriguing, really unique. The characters were just great. It was really cool to see how Kat, who's this instinct-driven career detective, is dealing with grief and, coming to conflict with the cold logic of Locke, the AI. The ideas in this were really cool to explore themes of instinct versus logic, themes of equity as well, what makes people human. And this really made me think. I thought the premise was unique and really, really cool. And the only thing that stopped me giving it higher than 4 stars was because I think there were a few plot conveniences that were a little bit implausible in my mind. I would, however, encourage any lovers of mystery novels wanting to try sci-fi to give this a go, because it really is a bit of a genre blend and the sci-fi elements are minor. I mean, just the AI aspect. The rest of it really reads as a mystery thriller. So highly recommended. The book I read instead of Black Holes was Sam Kean's Caesar's Last Breath. Sam Kean is one of my favorites science writers. This is a non-fiction book that I gave 5 stars to. Now, it did not fulfill any prompts in my TBR game, but it did fulfill the Scientific September prompt, compounded, because it deals with chemistry. It explores different gases on Earth, how they were discovered, how they have shaped history, and how they've shaped life on Earth. This was beautiful. Sam Kean's books, I would recommend to anyone. There was nothing wrong with this. I just wanted more and more and more. I read it in about a day, despite it being non-fiction. He has a great narrative style, and to me, he's just a master science writer. It is entertaining, yet highly educational, and had a really good mix of chemistry and history. And it deals with everything from helium to radioactivity, and it's just so cool. And please, if you love popular science, and in fact, even if you're just mildly intrigued by science, I would highly recommend this book. It was just such a fun read. The other science fiction book I read in September was I Contain Multitudes by Yong. This once again fulfilled the prompt It's Alive for Scientific September because it deals with biology, and it also fulfilled my TBR prompt, non-fiction. Now I end up giving this 4 stars. It explores how the microbes in our bodies and the microbes in other animals are pretty much vital to our survival, vital to the entire planet, vital to our ability to digest food and fight off illness, etc., and how the microbes, the individual microbes in different people might explain some of the diseases that we're prone to and some of the potential for future medicine. It was a very interesting book for anyone who kind of enjoys exploring viruses and bacteria and fungi and things like that. And it really explored those cool interactions between microbes and some species with a really good mix of science and narrative. For example, it gave a really good description of how these certain squid have bacteria that are luminescent, so that the squid don't show up as shadows against the starlit sky, so that they are not likely to be spotted by predators. I think that's just so cool how evolution has assisted the survival of these species so well. Problem I had with this book, the reason why I only gave it 4 stars despite it being fabulous, was because it is a bit repetitive at times. I feel that Yong sometimes comes back to the same point over and over. He kind of drums the idea of trying to protect microbes a little too much, I felt. Became a bit preachy near the end, but also even in his examples, he keeps coming back to them at times. And I'm not the kind of reader who wants to read the same thing over and over. I just wanted to explain once and that's it. I want to move on. So that's a flaw for me. However, that's not necessarily a flaw for everyone. Some people like to circle back to the points, circle back to some of the examples to fully develop an understanding of what is being explored. I would recommend this to lovers of popular science, anyone who is interested in biology. I think this is an intriguing and really interesting read. Book that wasn't on my TBR, but I did read on audio book, is Tiamat's Rowe by James S.A. Corey, and this is the 8th book in the Expanse series. I ended up giving this 3 stars. This fulfilled the Scientific September prompt, spacey hijinks, because of course the entire series is a space opera. I'm not going to obviously give you the synopsis for Tiamat's Rowe because that is a bit spoilery, but the first book, Leviathan Wakes, deals with a solar system colonized by Earth where there are tensions between Earth, Mars, and the people who live in the asteroid belt. Then an ice-making crew and a grizzled detective come together to investigate a missing person and a suspicious artifact, and shenanigans ensue, awful things ensue. It becomes a very politically interesting series. It is not going to be your fantasy that deals with aliens left, right, and center. It is very much about the relationships between different groups and their power plays. And so if you enjoy strong political elements in your space operas, then this book series is indeed for you. Now, for me, I did really love the characters, because some of these characters are some of my favorite characters, and it was nice to see some of them coming back. And there are also some really cool new characters. So, for example, the character of Teresa, really interesting. Cool plot twist, which is expected in The Expanse. There is mounting tension, definitely, and you can tell that the finale's on its way in. I love the exploration of the themes of responsibility, power, and control. However, I still feel that these books are nowhere near as good as the first few books. The first 4 books for me were like the best of the series. Book 1 and 4 were my favorites. They were just really cool. I also found in this particular one that some of the POV chapters are a little boring and I didn't feel like they really furthered the plot much. And I wasn't very motivated to pick it up at times. I dislike the audio narrator too. He has one of those voices which some people would love. I know some people love this narrator, but it's the sort of voice that makes it difficult for me to pay attention at times. And I found myself having to rewind a lot in order to pick up something that I'd missed. But as I said, if you love space operas and you love political books, then this book's for you. Now I'll move on to my fantasy books that I read. And one of them was Under the Whispering Door by TJ Klune. And this was to fulfill the bookworm game prompt, A Day as an Ant, because of course ants go under doors. I know, I made it fit because like how many books could I find that fulfill this prompt, right? Now this I read as an ebook and I gave it 4 stars. It follows Wallace, who's this cutthroat, workaholic lawyer who suddenly dies and finds himself having to come to terms with his life and death in a tea shop run by Hugo, whose job is to assist people to cross over. Now, this explores really cool themes such as regret, love, death, redemption, found family. And because of this, I would suggest that you look up the trigger warnings, because there are a lot of, it does deal with death quite substantially and different forms of death. So do look that up. What I loved about this were the characters. TJ Klune is really good at creating really engaging, lovable characters. They are flawed, yet you adore them. Great dog in it too. I love books of dogs. It really explores these deep themes in a whimsical and sort of lighthearted manner, which is really cool. And that's something I really like about TJ Klune, is that he can do this so successfully. This book made me cry, and books seldom make me cry. Yet it also made me laugh, and it also was really heartwarming and made me feel really good about life. So he's just a master at doing this. What I didn't like about it, and the reason why I didn't give it 5 stars, is because there was some very rapid character development, which I found a little bit implausible. I just couldn't believe that someone could change that much. But anyway, that's my opinion. And of course, maybe someone in that situation would change that quickly. I really don't know. I would recommend this to any lovers of philosophical literature written in a lighthearted manner. Another audiobook I read is City of Nightmares by Rebecca Schaeffer. Now, this is a YA fantasy novel. It's the first in a series, and I gave it 4 stars. This does not fulfill any prompts. This was just a book I decided to listen to. And it follows Ness, who's found sanctuary among the Friends of the Restful Soul, which is possibly a cult, but in a world where people who dream turn into their worst nightmares. And then an unexpected event makes her question everything and have to face her worst fears. What I really liked about this was the audio narrator. Really good, highly recommended. And I mean, I recommend it because Her narration gelled with me. It made me pay attention. I'm not very good at audio, so I can only listen to certain narrators. I love the character development in this. Very creative premise too. The idea of nightmares was really cool. And I enjoyed the horror elements in it. This book could pretty much be described as a paranormal Gotham City. What I didn't like about this, and the reason why I gave it 4 stars instead of 5, was because the plot became a little convoluted at times, and it was a bit slow at the beginning. And also Ness wasn't particularly likable, particularly at the beginning. However, I would highly recommend this to any lovers of urban fantasy with horror elements. Now, a book I did not enjoy, and it breaks my heart to say it, because I was really looking forward to this book. It was an anticipated release, and that's The Navigating Fox by Christopher Rowe. This is, I believe, a standalone fantasy novella, and I read it on ebook. It did not fulfill any prompts. It just that it happened to, I pre-ordered it and it turned up on my Kindle, and I'm like, you know what, I'm going to read it because I'm so looking forward to it. I adore foxes, and this cover is one of the most beautiful covers I have seen all year. I adored it. And so I just sat down with, a cup of tea, and I was so excited to get to read this. And I started reading it and just, not so good. But anyway, the synopsis is pretty much the only known navigating fox in this world is hired for a job leading people and knowledgeable animals to this particular place. I'm not going to tell you where because it kind of ruins some of the story. But the point of this is he needs to redeem himself after a disastrous expedition where no one survived. It basically is set in this world where certain animals are given knowledge. And by being given knowledge, it means that they become very human-like. Now, they still retain their animal form, but they are able to speak and function like people, and they are given rights equivalent to people. So really cool premise, and I love this premise. It also explored really cool themes such as death, prejudice, redemption. However, I gave this 1 star, and this is my lowest rating of the year. And the reason for this is because it was mostly exposition. It felt very disjointed too. It was literally no showing at all. It was all telling. The characters to me sounded the same in their dialogue. So if you didn't actually have a name, you wouldn't be able to distinguish it. The characters' dialogue sounded exactly like the narrator, and they all sounded exactly like each other. So that was just a bit difficult to follow, a bit difficult to get their personalities. I found the prose really dry. It was almost academic in tone, like reading a textbook. And it was very difficult to picture the world because there was very little description. And I felt that with this premise where you got all these knowledgeable animals in this really cool environment where you need navigating foxes to get people safely to a place, I thought this would be a really cool opportunity to really explore the world. I feel that this may have worked better as a full-length novel instead of a novella, where some of the world could have been fleshed out, some of the characters could have been described more fully, we could have got to know some of their motivations and personalities a bit more deeply. So I feel that this may have been a reason why it fell flat for me. Having said that, some people really liked this book, and I can imagine that if you enjoy fable-like stories and this particular style of prose doesn't bother you, then this could be a really cool book. It didn't work for me, however. A book that did work for me, however, is The Adventures of Amina al-Sirafi by Shannon Chakraborty. This is a fantasy novel that I believe is going to be the first in a series, which I'm really looking forward to reading the second one. I gave it 5 stars. It didn't fulfill any particular prompts. I just felt like reading it. A mood read. It follows a retired pirate who is hired to find a missing girl. So she rejoins the old crew and embarks on this fantastical adventure on the high seas. It is so cool. I absolutely love the setting. It's set in the Middle East and on ships. Really cool writing style as expected from Shannon Chakraborty. Excellent character development. I loved these characters so much. I mean, they were definitely flawed, but lovable. I love that. That's my favorite. Flawed yet lovable. Really, the main character's a strong, older female as well, which I really liked to see. And ultimately, this is a really exciting adventure romp that still managed to explore themes such as family, freedom, and found family. Now, if I had to find a flaw, it's that it spent a little too much time in a particular setting halfway through. However, I still enjoyed that. I just could not put this down. I just loved it so much. And I would highly recommend this to any lovers of adventure stories and those in search of any Middle Eastern inspired fantasy. And the final book I read in September was Book Lovers by Emily Henry. This was to fulfill the prompt Books, Libraries and Language. This is a romance which follows Nora, a workaholic literary agent who's dragged to a small country town for a summer holiday by her younger sister. Here she runs into one of her enemies, an editor who had turned down one of her author's books. I gave this 5 stars. I loved it. I love Emily Henry's writing. It is just so beautiful. The cadence is wonderful. It's engaging. It's philosophical, quote-worthy, funny, just reads so well. It also treats the enemies to lovers trope very well, because it's not always my favorite trope, and I really enjoyed it in this one. And it examines the way life kind of breaks us and builds us up again through themes of self-discovery, grief, duty to family. It was just a beautiful, beautiful book. The settings were so wonderfully described, both New York and the small country town. I loved the ending, and I loved the way she subverted some of the tropes. I would highly, highly recommend this to any lovers of romantic comedies. You will adore this. It's wonderful. And that's it. They are the books I read in September. Thank you so much for watching, and until I see you next time, take care.